Good evening. Welcome to the second of the British Deer Society's webinars. It's slightly delayed. We had some technical hitches, some problems that we had to overcome on the last occasion. But this evening we are tackling what some see as quite a challenging issue, and that is the debate between lead and copper bullets and copper ammunition. We have three people on the panel tonight, three people who are prepared to put their heads above the parapet and to talk and to engage in debate. It's going to be educational, it's going to be interesting, and hopefully it's going to be stimulating. I'm pretty confident it will be. Just so that we're absolutely clear, our panel members are expressing their own views because they have certain priorities which they cannot compromise. So we've got a really interesting evening set for us, but just before we get there, I've got to give some PR here. Our next talks we are setting up for the 18th of November, subject to be confirmed, but it will be meaty, and 16th of December, subject to be confirmed. And for those of you who haven't already done so, it's the annual general meeting of the British Deer Society this week. So our volunteers tonight in the panel are Nick Rout, who is a trustee director of the Society, who is also the chair of the East Anglian Group. We've got Megan Rowland, who is a deer stalker from the north of Scotland and a gamekeeper, and who's written a really interesting article about deer in shooting times today. And we've got Andrew Venables, who is a trainer and is from WMS, who many people will know Andrew from visiting his sites and reading his articles and being involved with some of his work. And as I forgot who I am myself, I better say it as I remembered. I'm Dr. Maurice Charlton. I'm the chair of Yorkshire branch, and I'm a trustee director and chairman of the England-Wales Area Council. So without any further ado, we need to get into this. I'm going to start with Nick. Nick, this debate, is there a debate over lead and copper, or is it we're just going to have to get on with it and accept it?
Well, good evening, Maurice, and hello, everybody. Yeah, I don't think there is really a debate over it, as much as the changes that we're looking at won't come through legislation. They won't come through the game dealers driving it. They'll come from the end users, who will demand that what they're eating is shot without using lead in it. This is a situation which we find ourselves in, and there's not really a great deal we're going to be able to do about it if we want to carry on selling venison in the long term. Whilst I'm on the subject, I'm going to give you a quick update on the venison trade, and that is, unfortunately, with the current situation throughout this country not getting any better, pubs and hospitality all being restricted further, the chances of a market for venison isn't looking any better. That said, a lot of people are attempting to market venison themselves locally or through social media, and this appears to be meeting with great success. However, as an industry, we do need to keep things legal and above board. So I'm going to take this opportunity to just run through with you what you can and can't do from your home larder facility. This is if you're south of the border. However, you need to check on the regulations and laws depending on the area you live or work in. Domestic supply. If you're shooting game to supply your own family or give away to friends and family on an occasional basis, it's classed as domestic supply, and none of the food hygiene regulations apply. However, you need to ensure that the food is safe. If you're supplying to a game dealer, you must register with your local authority as a food business. This will include your larder if you use it to store game. This is done easily online with your local authority. If you need any advice, contact that local authority and they'll point you in the right direction. Every carcass that is supplied needs to be inspected and tagged by a trained person, including all relevant information, as well as records being kept for the larder. In the same way, if you only supply your whole carcass in the skin to the final consumer or to local retailers, again, you need to be registered as a food business. Supply the food safe and maintain traceability. The supply of processed carcasses to the final consumer or to local retailers supplying the final consumer. Under this provision, you can process small quantities of game which you have shot yourself selling it to the final consumer or to local retailers, and then sell to the final consumer. You will need to comply with the general hygiene requirements by having suitable premises and working to a hazard analysis critical control point management plan to ensure food safety, as well as complying with traceability and food packaging regulations. You will need to register with your local authority under EC Regulation 852/2004, and you can only deal with animals which you have killed yourself and cannot buy in from others. Small quantities. This is not defined by a particular figure, but is limited to what the individual can supply and the available market in the locality. And locality means the county where you are based, any adjoining county, or within 30 miles, whichever is the greater. Whichever method of moving your carcasses you are choosing to use, you need to work out what is the best way of doing this, and to make sure you stay legal if it is you as the foods, and you need to check with the Food Standards Agency website for the information to make sure that you get that right. There's plenty of useful guidance on there and plenty of information. Certainly in my experience, my local authority has been particularly helpful in helping me get set up and working in this way.
Okay, thanks, Nick. I think that's a pretty timely reminder. Does that information also link in with Alan Barrell's article in Deer Journal as well?
Yes, it's very much based on that article in Deer magazine.
Okay,
so
brilliant.
Thank you, Alan, for the input in that.
Okay, thank you. Megan, for yourself, is there any debate over lead and copper? Is this something you've been using? Is this something you've had success with?
So I'm in my 5th season working on a deer estate, managing deer. For the first 3 years, we were using lead to great success. It's no reason we shouldn't. And then last year we made the switch to copper ammunition. We managed the estate according to a habitat management plan for benefit of a range of species, but eagles and birds of prey are kind of on the list. If we're leaving grouse on the hill, then we need to be certain that there's not the risk of lead accumulation in the habitat and in anything that they're eating. We saw that with DDT. It was the build-up over time that was one of the big issues, and it's the similar argument with lead. And well, not even an argument. There's evidence to suggest it's a problem. So anyway, we made the switch to copper last year for the stags and subsequently for the hinds. We're now just finished the stag season and again have used copper. We haven't had any runners. We haven't had any issues with it at all, really. It does present a really nice, clean carcass when it's used. I'd say that when you're using it, because the one of the concerns people have with it is the ricochet, in which case you shouldn't be firing it at something that's going to bounce off anyway. You should always be aware of that risk, regardless of what caliber or type of ammunition you're using. But you do need to make sure you've got a very absorbent backdrop behind you. And what else? No, it's been a really good round. You need to be certain that because you don't get the same expansion and fragmentation of the bullet, because it mushrooms rather than fragmenting. You don't get the same enormous wound channel that you perhaps get with lead. So you do need to be, I think, more certain of your shot placement. That's probably one of the things I would say. But it still delivers a hell of a blow, and in and of itself, we haven't had any issues. I don't see that there's a huge debate about this now. It's the way the market's going, it's the way the politicians are driving it, and it's the way that the venison market is going. A lot of game dealers are now talking about not taking lead shot carcasses. So no, as far as I can see as a practitioner, it is the way it's going, and we kind of need to work with that and be making that change. It's an easy win for the sector.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, is there any debate? You are someone who is involved in training people and giving people experience at firing over different and varying ranges and developing shooters. Do you identify any problems with this particular munitions?
It's interesting because the debate in many ways goes on, but the debate when I started using some non-lead bullets, copper bullets, more than 25 years ago now. It wasn't a debate about the legality of this or that or the other. It was me looking at the copper-wrapped lead bullets that we were using, the simple ones, the straightforward cheap ones, the more complex ones that put onto the marketplace to give much better weight retention and to prevent all the loss of weight in the lead fragmentation you get with high velocity rifle bullets in carcasses. And the move towards the copper bullet, the first ones that came out in the States 30 years ago now, was actually to seek better bullet performance. It wasn't to take lead out of something. It was because lead bullets wrapped with copper are more than a 150-year-old item, a lot more than that probably. And it hasn't changed or progressed. We know that lead bullets tend to break up, particularly at high velocities. We know that limits penetration. We know that that affects shot placement because you may put the bullet in the right place to go 3 dimensions through the animal, but will it arrive at its destination after hitting a shoulder, after going through other portions of the animal? And the answer with simple lead was no. The answer with cheap lead bullets wrapped with copper was no. Over the sort of, I think the partition bullet was developed in the late 1930s by hunters, so that you'd have a bullet which could only lose the front end, the rear would carry on penetrating. The copper bullets are one example of a solution to this. There's actually not just copper, there's a lot of other products out there which are designed to give controlled expansion without lead, or rapid fragmentation but without lead. And the debate is simply, we should be counting our blessings that we have now a far greater choice of bullets than I had when I started in the mid-1970s. A far greater choice of bullets. I have grandchildren now. We know what we're learning about lead. We know that for children, developing fetuses, pregnant women, there is no lower safe limit for lead. People say, well, it's never done me any harm and I've eaten loads of shot. I've got lead shot in my legs. They never bother taking it out. I've no doubt eaten lead. And people are saying, well, it didn't do me any harm. That's an interesting and slightly arrogant position. I may have said it myself in the past, and I'm sorry I did, because I have a grandchild. If I have a choice of providing her with a venison burger that absolutely definitely has no trace of lead in it, or I have the choice of providing her with a venison burger that might have lead in it, as a grandparent, how could I possibly offer her or my grandson the leaded option, the potentially leaded option, when now we have the science that tells us there's no lower safety limit and lead reduces IQ in children. Lead affects brain development in fetuses.
That's really interesting. Thanks, Andrew. Megan, you have the advantage over all of us on the panel of having watched a video today. Would you like to just share with us your views of the video and what the content of that video was?
Just take myself off mute. It was from John Gregson, who works for Waitrose. It's well worth a watch, actually. He's the chap there who basically decided their policy on no lead in the game they sell. I mean, as he pitches it at the start, he himself is a shooter. It's been a big part of his life since he was a kid. He's absolutely dead keen that Waitrose keep supplying game, that other supermarkets also do the same. But as he says, it's a great product, and there's a lot to be said for it in terms of its, low fat, free range, and all sorts. There's lots of benefits to it. But as his point of view was that as a food consumer, for the reasons Andrew's just talked about, as a food consumer, can you really sell a product? As a food marketer, can you really sell a product that contains potentially toxic components to some of the people that may be consuming it? And as far as Waitrose were concerned, no is the answer. And it's like we've said, the switch is very much being driven by what people at the end of the food chain want. His video is it's worth a watch, because he says they're looking at future markets as much as present ones. So that is people in my generation and younger, the millennials and all the rest of them down the line, who are, it's worth a watch. He says that they were spending more on food than previous generations, and he said they're far more concerned with the sort of ethics and traceability than a lot of other generations have been in sort of opinion polls and all sorts. That there's a series of what I wrote it down. He said radical transparency is what they want with what they're eating. It's why you've seen this switch to sort of plant-based diets and veganism and all the rest of it. People, rightly or wrongly, have made that choice to switch to that line of work, but that type of food because they feel it gives them more accountability for what they're eating. I mean, I think in terms of eating game, especially do shot yourself, there's nothing better in terms of traceability. So no, it's worth a watch. Definitely worth looking at if you've got
Okay,
it.
that's brilliant. Thank you. I take it we just kind of Google Waitrose and look for
On YouTube.
venison on YouTube. Okay, I'm pretty certain that other supermarkets, various other chains, will also be rapidly, probably while we speak, putting out videos on venison and the benefits of game. So you might be able to see publicity materials in all supermarkets. If you do, please email them in to BDS so that we can collate those, so we know more about what's happening in the market. Andrew, one of the things that Megan was talking about, the impact of the rounds on the carcass. Did you have some comments to talk about on how these rounds impact upon the animals?
Yes. Everybody watching this has different calibers of rifle firing, different weights and diameters of bullets. There's a huge amount of choice, and the choice is increasing, which is only good for us. And it's horses for courses. I've said this on a number of other productions. You don't use a bullet designed for shooting foxes in your 243 to go deer stalking if you've done any reading and you have consideration for your quarry. Similarly, you may not use the best constructed oryx and wildebeest friendly 308 bullet in your 308 rifle. If you were going out foxing, you may well choose a more frangible bullet. With lead and copper based bullets, we've got an awful lot of choice. And the debate seems to have polarized onto what people are calling copper bullets. Actually, that's a tiny part of the story. If I just hold this thing up, you'll probably see there's lots of different colors of bullets there. This is a tiny selection of what's available in lead-free bullets on the market. There's rounds in here which are copper-based, which are designed to give you this fabulous shape we're getting used to from the copper expansion of copper bullets, yeah? Okay. But we also have rounds in here, like this one from a major German manufacturer. This basically has got a slightly copper jacket, but inside it's got compressed food grade tin. You've all eaten food out of tins for a long time. This is designed with compressed food grade tin in it, powdered tin. The front end is designed to expand very rapidly and effectively blow up just inside the animal's chest, 40% of it. And the detritus left in the carcass is food grade tin. If you eat it, it's going to do you no harm at all. Just as if you get shavings off your baked bean tin, it's going to do you no harm at all. The rear 60% of the bullet is designed to stay in one piece with that more compressed hard grade of tin and carry on penetrating through the animal to give you an exit wound, having dumped most of its energy in the animal. This isn't one of the copper bullets. It doesn't produce this, the classic sort of, there's another one there. It doesn't produce this classic copper mushrooming. What happens is the tip of this bullet, go that way, blows up. So this is reproducing the performance that the partition bullet I was mentioning, developed in the late 1930s, gave to hunters, so that if they were hunting elk and tough animals, the rear part of the bullet would give them the penetration they needed. If they were hunting a whitetail, the front end gave them the rapid expansion they needed. They're trying to get something that does both jobs. Now, we've got choice away from lead. In the First World War and the Second World War, people started using steel jacketed bullets. There's been comment on social media, oh, the copper bullets are going to tear my rifle barrel apart. I've got an old rifle, and if I use pure copper bullets, it's going to tear the rifling out. You've been shooting bullets wrapped in copper all your life. How's a pure copper bullet going to do that when gilding metal jackets are harder than pure copper? And if a lot of the Mausers around after the Second World War and the First World War had steel bullets put through them, some were steel with lead in the middle, others were mild steel with a tomback jacket because they ran out of copper and lead. So for a long time, we've been using lots of different bullets, and we have masses of choice now, tiny selection there. The debate goes on.
Okay, and it will. I'm sure it will, and I'm sure.
Yeah.
I hope we're stimulating debate now. I'm going to come to you, Nick, because as a someone from up to north, and it's a bit grim at the moment. We have a reputation for being penurious and careful with our cash in our wallets. And I've got a question here from Frank Byrne, and he asks, as a deer management company, and I do have to, I'll mention the brand here, using Copper Lepua Naturalis Sacco Kalahari, they shoot about 1,600 plus deer a year. We find copper very good. And as copper's coming onto the market now, and I think everyone might have a perspective on this, why are the prices not dropping? Why are the prices going up? £40 to £52 for 20 round. Minimum orders for price breaks are around about 200, Frank writes.
Well, that's just business, isn't it? You've got unscrupulous manufacturers making hay while the sun shines. I'm quite sure that when we're all on not using lead-cooled bullets, we'll be in a position where we can actually get better prices. And obviously, as they step up manufacture of these bullets going forward, it's going to make a difference to the costings of them.
Okay.
I have a comment I can probably help.
Yes, Andrew.
Here are 4 examples of lead-free bullets. This one, from a German manufacturer, has actually been pitched in at about 35 to 40 pounds for 20. This one, from more of a Scandinavian manufacturer, is more like 50 to 55 pounds for 20. This one, which was mentioned earlier by Frank Bryn, is about sort of 50, 55. But actually this one, as an example, this is from a European manufacturer. It's an excellent bullet. This is actually going to be hitting the market about 35 to 40 pounds for 20 at this stage, when actually they're not making many of these. I don't think it's unscrupulous manufacturers. I think it's simple scales of economy. If you're making small batches of things for a specialist market, it costs you more, and you can charge a bit more, obviously. But if you're making something for a mass market, it's coming down. There are a number of brands of bullets which we weren't able to test in some recent video work we did, which have come through the American market, and actually they're looking quite cost effective. Already, if you're in the UK, you can buy a brand of lead cord, copper jacketed hunting bullet, which is about £15 for 20. Okay, 15 or 16 pounds for 20 in deer friendly calibers. You can buy a very similar bullet from another manufacturer for 30 to 40 pounds for 20. And if you want premium ammunition, this premium ammunition designed to give more penetration, etc., the sort of thing you might take to Africa on a hunt, you're going to be paying probably 50 to 60 pounds for the best of it. There's already a wide disparity in the market. It's like shotgun cartridges. You can buy premium stuff, you can buy cheap stuff. Actually, they all do a very similar job. So the price will come down. And already we have a situation where you can get lead-free bullets, certainly from 35 up to 60 pounds in standard calibers like 308, 30-06, 270, 243, whatever. You're hunting deer. You don't have to practice with that ammunition. You can practice with whatever stuff you want to practice with. This is about what we put in the meat we eat. I don't mind putting a £3 bullet into the meat I eat if it's going to do a better job and actually give me a cleaner carcass than a £1 bullet. Why would I care about that £2?
Okay, thanks.
Shooting muntjac, you care, but that's my opinion anyway.
Thanks, Andrew. That's really interesting. And you kind of lead us in. There are a mass of questions that have been submitted. And there might be some myth busting to be done here. And it was interesting that Megan referred to this about the backdrop. A lot of people are writing in. I wonder whether Megan would like to comment on this first, and then to Nick, then back to Andrew, about the risk of ricochet from copper bullets. People say that there is a higher risk of a ricochet from the copper bullets. And I just know on those high hills where you've got wonderful schists and granites that if they hit, you've no idea where they're going to go, and those boggy areas. Have you had any problems with ricochets, Megan?
Not for us, no, honestly. It's not been a concern. The one thing I am terrified about ricochet with is the 2.2. That terrifies me. But with the copper ammunition at this point, no issues. I mean, with regards to boggy ground, it's perfect. You know, it's going to keep going and go straight in and not stop. With the rockier ground, I would, in my mind, because of those sort of thoughts, and I would be more nervous about doing that myself. It's not an absorbent backdrop. I'd be nervous about that regardless of caliber.
Okay.
To be honest.
Thank you. It's just interesting because that marries in with what Frank Byrne was raising. He's a tracker with UK DTR, the Dogs for Deer. He doesn't see many runners exceeding 150 meter range except when it's a misplaced shot, and that's what you were referring to much earlier. Nick, do you have any comments on the issues of ricochet? You do a huge amount of training.
Yeah, I've used non-lead in the past. I'm currently using non-lead. From my perspective, as with every shot that you ever take, you make sure you've got a good backstop on it. The other thing to bear in mind is that the copper bullets retain nearly 100% of their weight. So once it's gone through the deer, you're actually dealing with nearly 100% of that bullet when it comes to ricocheting somewhere. So that may or may not be an issue to it, but certainly I'd say that with maybe a more compact lump of ammunition passing through a deer, that has got the potential to be slightly more dangerous when it does hit something on the other side that can send it off in a direction you're not expecting.
Okay, thanks. And Andrew, any comments on that?
I tie very much into what the others said. Nick and Megan both made very good points. You have to consider over-penetration, missing and ricochet risks with anything you fire at anything at any time. Thinking I'm shooting a 243 foxing bullet so it won't ricochet is nonsense. Thinking I'm shooting a fairly heavyweight copper bullet so it will ricochet is nonsense. They can both ricochet. One may give a bigger signature than others. If you have a look at this for a minute, I keep going the wrong way. If you look on this side, there's 2 rounds here. There we are. These are both 308 on this side here. These are both deer legal 308 bullets. Okay. Look at the long one and look at the stumpy mushroomed one. One is 110 grain copper expanding bullet that's done a fantastic job of expanding. The other is a 180 grain copper bullet that's done a fantastic job of expanding. You don't want to be shooting this one at Muntjac and Row in Lincolnshire. You can shoot this one at anything, anywhere. And we must be wary in the market of taking things which are made in other countries for other game animals and thinking, well, it's copper, it'll be fine. And then discovering that this carries a lot more energy through the average British deer than we need to carry through. If we go fast and light for caliber, if I just unstick this one and you have a look at it, this is an extraordinary thing. It's clearly going to dump its energy very quickly in the animal it's going into. It's expanded to over 2.5 times diameter. I'll just try and grab the rear end of it. It's expanded, no I can't, it's expanded to 2.5 times diameter in 308. And they make these in other calibers as well. So again, horses for courses. We should all be concerned about ricochets. If you want to minimize it, you want to dump more energy in the animal. Interestingly, there's videos available online of 180 grain bullets like this being fired out of 300 Win Mags into ballistic medium. They enter the ballistic medium, which is 24 inches, or a big elk, if you want to look at it that way, at 3,000 feet per second. They exit the other side at 250 feet per second. That is not a ricochet risk. That's something tumbling out of the animal. So if you choose the lighter, stumpier, quicker bullets, particularly for the smaller species of British deer, and you keep these things for your driven boar or whatever, or your big stag up in Norfolk or something like that, again, it's horses for courses. So Ricochet, Rich, just to get back to the original question, I consider Ricochet with everything. Yes, if there's more bullet goes out the other side, there's more potential for energy being transferred. But actually, it's exactly the same with premium lead and copper hunting bullets. It's exactly the same.
Can I just
That's
ask a
fine.
question,
Nick.
Andrew? With the smaller calibers that we're likely to use, let's say for 6.5, for example, it's an exceedingly long bullet to gain the same weight. With that bullet, is it fully expanding when it's going through a relatively small animal, such as a fallow doe downwards, so roe and muntjac, fallow doe, Chinese water deer? Is it fully expanding before it's exited the other side of maybe only a 6-inch wide body?
This is a 120 grain 6.5 bullet recovered from a water-based stopping medium at 250 meters, and I think you can see that it's expanded to the design capacity. There's another one here. This is actually the same bullet. Oops, sorry. And this one hit a water-based, and animals are 80% water, water-based medium at 100 meters. And you can see it's expanded incredibly violently. Look at the blades on that.
Yeah.
I would not want to show myself to that.
Yeah. At what point is the expansion happening? Is it as it's hitting the outside of the water-based target?
When we do the same experiments with a ballistic medium, the expansion is actually far more rapid than a lead and copper-based bullet. You get the entry into the ballistic medium. The full expansion is achieved within about 7 to sort of 8 millimeters of hitting the ballistic block, whereas with most lead bullets, the full expansion is within about 25 millimeters of hitting the block. So remarkably, yes, they expand incredibly quickly. And this type of bullet, one of the other choices I pointed out earlier, which has this powdered zinc in the front with a ballistic tip to help disturb it, it literally blows up on the inside of the rib cage. It starts expanding almost on the fur. It's expanding by the time it gets to the skin. By the time it does the chest wall and the rib, the front end is actually fragmenting, and it makes an astonishing initial wound into the chest of an animal. Again, horses for courses, all available.
Okay, thanks. I think we've probably stimulated enough conversation and discussion about the ricochets and about the impact of the rounds on the animals. I hope that Luke Hooper, who wrote in a question which was talking about ricochets, a very thoughtful and reflective question, is satisfied with that answer.
So just interject one more thing. An interesting thing about ricochets, and please remember this when you're doing your courses, setting your targets up and zeroing, the dangerous ricochets are the ones you never hear. If you walk behind your target after you put a cardboard box on a flinty field in Lincolnshire, and you see skid marks behind the target 10, 15 meters away on the ground, the bullets have skidded along the ground, maintained their gyroscopic stability, and they've gone straight off towards the church steeple in the background. When you hear a noise from a ricochet, like a spaghetti western, if you fire a rifle, notably with 2.2s, I noticed Megan's noticed this one a lot, and you hear this noise, my finger is describing what that noise is telling you. It's an arcing, tumbling bullet, and when you hear that stop, it's landed. Those are not the dangerous ricochets. You wouldn't want to get hit on the side of the head with one, it might cut you. But actually, the worst ricochets are the ones you never hear, and if you don't look behind the target, you never see. So be wary of that one.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. I think this has got a specific reference from Derek Stimpson, who is the chairman of the Southeast branch in England, and it has a Scottish element, but I think it will impact upon all of us. A slightly cautious question. Bearing in mind that copper is also toxic in certain circumstances, are we sure that shooting copper bullets into the environment, especially where it's wet, and I'm sure, Megan, you might be quite cross with this, in brackets, most, if not all of Scotland, is safer in the long term, at the same time being aware that we use copper jackets now? Are there any risks to copper in the environment? Is there any research? Do we know anything about that? Are the manufacturers cautiously or cleverly hiding all that? Nick's got his hand up first.
Yeah, okay. So if we're going to look at risks of things being in the environment, as human beings, taking our motor cars and driving into Scotland or into remote areas, we are causing a toxic problem. We shouldn't be there, but we are there. So what we've got to do is we've got to manage that risk in the best way that we can. And obviously putting lead into the environment, whereby you're carrion eating birds, such as your eagles and what have you, who pick up the gralloch and end up with a lump of lead inside their crop, which eventually will kill them. That is not going to be good for the environment. However, I'm pretty sure there's been no evidence of a lump of copper inside a crop killing a bird yet. I might be wrong on that one, but
the Condor project in California did extensive work feeding particles of different things to different unfortunate animals that were part of a testing process, and they could sterilize chickens by giving them very small amounts of copper. They could sterilize chickens by giving them very small amounts of lead. Correction there, my apologies. They could kill chickens by giving them larger amounts of lead. They couldn't get any biological negative effect on chickens by feeding them pieces of copper dust. The same goes with tin. I mentioned food grade tin being used in some of the bullets. Some people have said, oh, you can't fire copper into woodland areas because copper nails kill trees. Google it. No, they don't. Copper nails have never killed trees because water pipes are made of copper now, and copper isn't soluble in water, and the only thing going around a tree is water. So that's a load of bunkum. Upland areas could even be blessed by a little bit of copper, because one of the things noticed in most hill grazing areas is copper deficiency, which turns out in cattle, making them look as if they have spectacles because they get whitened fur around their eyes. We could even answer that putting copper back in is a slight blessing in copper deficient areas. Honestly, the answer is no. It doesn't kill trees. It doesn't harm wildlife. You can eat it. Why do you think your pipes these days are made of copper, not made of lead? Myth busted.
Okay, myth busted. Do you want to make any comment about Scotland, particularly refuting Derek's reference to most, if not all, of Scotland being somewhat damp? That's not my experience. Some wonderful weather up there.
In the rain the last few days, he's probably got a point, actually. It's pretty damp up here. No, I mean, I would have just said the same as Andrew. I mean, if he gave me a choice of drinking water out of lead or copper pipes, I don't know which one I'll be choosing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's I can't add anything more than what the guys have said, to be honest.
Okay, so we've actually looked at the copper as less of a risk in the environment, less of a risk to the consumer, a preference by many of the game dealers. There are still going to be the people who are wanting to persist, or who have vast stashes of lead ammunition that they're going to be using well into their dotage. Are there any updates on the research, writes Henley Bexley from the National Trust? Are there any updates on the research on small lead particles in venison? And if so, should traders and consumers be more or less concerned than before? Is this something that's been with us, or is this something new and developing? Any comments, any views on that?
Anyone in particular?
Anyone who wants to look alive?
I think Nick should answer first.
Okay, Nick.
Have I not covered this off yet? No, I've got nothing to say on that one, really. I think we've covered off pretty much everything I know about the job.
I think it's quite interesting how we've taken some quite deep scientific concepts and simplified them, and we've done some myth busting already. And I think a lot of the questions that have come in have been quite generic about the concerns there. And I'm going to come on to some of the arcane things next, the sort of slightly nerdy-ish type of things. We'll be talking about caliber in the remaining section. But I wonder how many of you have been reloading and what's your experience been with reloading of non-lead based ammunition. I know that's because Frank Byrne has been talking about he's had success with reloading, in particular with the Barnes. Other brands are available, of course. Do you reload, Megan?
No, I really don't.
You're far too busy, aren't you?
I certainly don't. I
It's for
certainly
nerdy
don't.
old men. It's all right.
Yeah, I'm not a nerdy old man yet. I don't go into a dark corner and do arcane things. Nick, have you had any experience of this?
Yes, I've been reloading for a few years now, and started reloading my 6.5 first of all, and had good results with it. I am using a lighter bullet and pushing it a lot faster. It seems to do the job. It drops the deer, does everything I need it to do. I think one of the things that certainly has come from what I've seen personally and in talking to other people is a real learning point here, is that the deer don't react to the shot in the same way that they do with lead. You don't get the same sound reported back to you that you do when you're using lead, and the deer don't seem to react in the same way, and that they can almost look as if they haven't been hit. So a lot of people are saying that you actually need, every time you pull that trigger, even if it looks as if you've 100% missed that deer, go and look. Chances are you haven't missed it and it will lay there. And that's a teaching which we're going to have to push out to all corners in a big way, especially as we move over to copper, because it does make a difference to the deer at the other end of where you're shooting to. I can see Megan's in agreement with me there.
Definitely. That's something that that I noticed first time, like last year, because I was using the 6.5 Creedmoor for the stags. My colleague was still using the 270, finishing up the last of the lead and then switched to copper after that. And I used the 6.5 Creedmoor, and yeah, completely different reaction to shot. Almost like I don't know if you've seen any arrow bow hunting hits on videos on YouTube. It's almost that same level of a twitch, rather than you see a stag shot with lead and it hits the shoulder and you see the leg drop and they react in a certain way that we all recognise. No, the copper is totally different. I've seen a couple of stags last year that almost didn't register that they'd been hit at all. They just sort of jumped and then stood there and then staggered off and then fell over. I'm assuming because of the wound channel inside, rather than it being rather than it sort of creating such a big wound channel. It was a slower process of a bleed out, but still a rapid death, but just a very different reaction. And I think, yeah, in terms of follow up, I think there'll be people that will think they haven't hit it, and they absolutely have. And it's definitely in a woodland context something to be aware of.
Okay, thanks, Megan.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting issue, and you had first bite at that, Nick. There, it does have implications for training, and it does have implications for expanding some of the best practice issues. So that's really interesting. It suggests something to the British Deer Society about its best practice and it's about its training and how we develop people when they're doing DSC1. And I'm sure it will also be part of the UK DTR training when they're talking to people as well. Really interesting points. Andrew, any comments on? It started with reloading, but we got sidetracked. But you might have some comments about the reloading, or you might have some comments about the use of the rounds and the reaction of animals.
Yeah, on the sort of front, Ian the Impala and Walter the Warthog there behind me were grassed in Africa, or dusted in Africa, if you like, in about 2002, and I was reloading Barnes 180 grain X bullets, which are no longer commercially available. They've moved on to other things now. Lots of other people are making similar things, Hornady, all sorts of people. And those were fairly heavy bullets, and those are not the biggest animals in the world, but the velocity was high. And there was a tendency for the animal, as you say, to look as if it had been tasered almost, stand there and fall, or to drop immediately. There's more of a tendency actually to shoulder shoot things in Africa, to be fair. We're more on the sort of soft tissue shots in the UK, trying to save meat. I have noticed some differences, but as we have morphed into the fast and light for caliber equation, and again, I can show you a couple of these bullets here. This is a 150 grain 308 bullet, which leaves a 300 Winchester Magnum rifle at about 3,300 feet per second or quicker. I won't mention the other speed. The same bullet can be fired out of a 308 at about 2,800 feet per second. This 110 grain 308 bullet can be fired out of a 308 at almost 3,200 feet per second, and it won't lose any more of its structure than that. It'll form this incredible petal. Sorry, I wasn't on camera then. It'll form this incredible sort of petal shape, and actually dump its energy very quickly. You get a completely different reaction to shooting an average British deer with a bullet at that speed than you do with the larger bullet, okay, which is doing more of that job. So you can actually control the damage you do, how quickly the animal drops, what happens at the shot, by being mindful. 308 gives lots of choices. I know that Meganon up in Scotland are going to have particular concerns at the moment, because in terms of bullet length and rifling and stability, in 243, because all of these non-lead bullets are longer for weight than lead cord bullets, actually the Scottish law of you can only shoot red deer with 100 grain 243 bullets is going to fall flat on its face within 2 years.
Yeah.
Because the only bullets available in 243, these come out of a 243 at 3,300 feet per second in factory loads. It's an incredible round. It makes a 243 seem almost as deadly as a 308, yet it's flat shooting and quite remarkable. Okay, you don't get the dramatic fragmentation. A muntjac shot in the front end with this, which drops instantly, to be fair, at virtually any range I've ever shot them, is edible right up to the bullet channel. But unless the Scottish legislature can somehow embrace this and make a change, the 243 within 2 years may be a dead round in Scotland. You won't be able to make a copper or a zinc round short enough to function in most 243s as they are. Maybe it's time for change. Change in legislation could be a great idea.
The recommendations, I don't know how it sort of, we had the deer working group set up by Scottish Government to review deer management in Scotland in its entirety. They had a review, which was a monster of a document, and definitely something for the bedside table. But there's some interesting recommendations to come out of it, and I think most of them will probably be given a nod. And one of those is to alter the legislation surrounding the 243, reducing the legal requirement down from 100, I think, to 80 grains.
That would be massively good news.
Happy to be corrected, but that is, I think, one of the. I think that was definitely in there. I haven't read it for ages.
That will be an absolute breath of fresh air to a lot of people watching this webinar, or who will subsequently watch it, wishing they got it the first time round.
Yeah, I think that absolutely spot on answers the question for someone known as Slider 2-on-2-on-2 with reference to Scottish legislation. And I'm sure that Scottish Council and people who are on the working group will keep people updated on that one. We're going to come again to some of those rather arcane issues. And this, I feel this almost as a plea from one of our colleagues, David Stewart, up in the Northeast branch. I've successfully used the same 243-270 ammo for over 20 years. I have neither the technical competence nor the confidence to find my way through the various alternatives to lead. What advice can the panel give to someone in circumstances that make upgrading really straightforward? Thank you, Dave Stewart. what advice can we give him?
I'll throw one in. I really enjoy using mobile phones, but I'm damned if I can work out how to make one. So since they came out a while ago, when I wanted a new mobile phone, I've actually gone to one of many companies who make mobile phones, and they've provided me with a new one, which they've done all the groundwork on. They've put it together, they've made sure it works, and hey, there it is. In terms of buying loaded ammunition, there's a lot of choice out there. There'll be an increasing number of friends on social media or whatever who can provide some basic guidance. You'll just be able to buy the stuff off the shelf. It all works. I've got about 25 different copper bullets in front of me, and I'll drop them all over the computer and turn it off if I try. But in this handful of rounds I've got here, they all work. Which one's the most accurate through your rifle? Only you can answer that by having a little go with it. If you're reloading, there's loads of different bullets available. There's lots of anecdotal stuff. There's loads of reloading information available. So my answer would be, if you've been using the same thing for 30 years, embrace change. Maybe it's time for a change. There's better stuff available now.
Okay, thanks. Just looking at some of the questions that's coming up in the chat line, we've got Rob 308 Windfast Speeds talks about barrel burners. The ricochet risk makes them unsuitable for NRA and MOD ranges. And they're not going to change the laws in Scotland for a few people wanting copper bullets. But I think we've probably successfully answered the latter part of that now. And I'm just wanting to satiate the people who are coming in on the questions. Are copper bullets barrel burners?
Well, only if copper jacketed bullets are barrel burners. Really, really quick bullets made of anything are barrel burners. Putting foxing bullets in your 243 going at 3,800 feet per second is one of the most destructive things you can do to a rifle barrel. Many people voluntarily do it and are perfectly happy with the results. If you want less wear on your rifle barrel, shoot slower rounds, basically. As I said, steel jacketed bullets have been going for 100 or more years. Amazingly, steel jacketed bullets don't appear to trash barrels in a couple of thousand rounds. So why would a copper bullet, after you've used copper jacketed bullets all your life before? On the military range question, at the moment, there is a bit of a moratorium on many MOD ranges with what they call monolithic bullets. This is because when they first turned up with 338 or notably 50 caliber sniper rounds on with accurate, long, heavy monolithic copper or bronze turned ammunition, they have a completely different ricochet and BC profile because they carry an enormous amount of energy. We're not talking an 80 grain 243 bullet, we're talking an 850 grain 50 caliber BMG bullet. And when they found those turning up outside the range templates, they very quickly, 7 kilometers outside the range templates, they put a ban on them. Now, interestingly, the American military stopped using lead bullets in 2013. I'll repeat that. The American Army, the whole machine, stopped using lead cord bullets in 2013 after about a 5-year transition period. The British Army, Radway Green, is currently making an all-copper bullet for the British Army with a steel penetrator tip on it, similar to the American one. So they'll be using copper bullets and nothing but copper bullets on their shooting ranges in the coming years. This is coming quite quickly. And once they do that, they won't want anyone shooting lead bullets on their ranges. A bit like the 243 information, which Megan brilliantly popped up on this webinar. Many people don't realise that. They think this copper bullet thing is something that was forced on hunting 2 years ago. I started using these 25 plus years ago. The Americans started making all copper bullets 30 odd years ago. This is not new. It's just taken a while to get to conservative shooting country.
Thanks, Andrew. You raised some interesting points, and we keep talking about the variety of bullets over time. We are very fortunate in Yorkshire and in Leeds. We have the adjunct of the Royal Armouries, and we've done a lot of work with the Royal Armouries. And we were trying to get a talk or a series of talks going on how what goes in comes out, which is basically explaining ammunition and talking about ammunition and the development of ammunition. One of the downsides, of course, is that you can't actually display live ammunition. Or that's part of the issue for the Royal Armouries. But of course, under the sort of Zoom circumstances, we are able to possibly do that, and it's something that we might explore in the future for a BDS evening, looking at the development of ammunition per se, as opposed to just the current debate, because I think we've got quite a consensus here. We've got A, it's going to be here to stay and we're going to have to work with it. B, we've got a best practices suggesting good backstops. We've got C, it makes a good quick clean kill. D, lead is not good in the environment. Copper probably has some ill effects, but it's not bad in the environment and it can help out. So we're kind of getting a consensus there. I've just got something coming from Hugh Russell, which is an observation. High velocity non-red hits the heart, liver, it explodes, and the animal drops very quickly in the lungs. Even expanded, not so much damage. It takes a little bit longer to bleed out. So we're going to get those observations coming over time. I do believe there's a project on the go at the moment of looking at shot damage betwixt lead and copper ongoing. I'm not sure how COVID might have impacted upon that, but the debate this evening and the questions that have come in suggest some other topics that we can explore, suggest some areas where we can perhaps improve our best practice, perhaps where we can improve our training, and hopefully has developed our knowledge. And hopefully people will write in, email in, or watch us on YouTube. We're just coming up to our cutoff point. Is there any final message that you'd like to give, Nick?
Only that when you pull that trigger and you think you've missed, follow up anyway, because the chances are there'll be a dead deer there somewhere, especially if you just put £5 worth of bullet at it.
Okay. Okay. Megan, any particular point that you would like to make?
Not to be put off by change. I mean, I think a lot of the hang-ups people have about copper are from when it originally entered the market and it was still in development. I mean, Andrew says he's been using it for years, and he have, but in terms of a broad market, it's still a very new product. And like anything, it takes time to bed in. And the stuff that we're able to access now is really very good. So give it a go.
Okay. And Andrew?
My last comment would be open your minds. I'm supposed to be a sort of grumpy old git. I'm supposed to have a closed mind and be telling you that lead's the future. It's not. Open your minds, embrace change, look into it, ignore the trolls on social media, actually take proper information from reasonable people who have actually shot the stuff and been out and used it. And it's very interesting that in the last 6 months, when you put up a steel shotgun shot thing or a copper bullet for rifles thing on social media, you get trolled out. The whole thing would be poisoned quite quickly. But actually, over the last 3 or 4 months, the tide is changing. And every time someone puts up a post now, there's a lot of intelligent stuff. And you suddenly realize a lot of friends of yours have been using this for years. They just didn't mention it yet. Open your minds, embrace the future, and let's be sure we carry the future of shooting forwards, modernizing as we need to. We're not fossils. We are a constantly evolving organism. We're hunters, we're conservationists. Let's move with the times.
Okay, thank you very much to Andrew Venables, to Megan Rowland, and to Nick Rout for putting your heads on the parapet. It's been stimulating, it's been interesting, times it's been humorous. We've had some good responses from people in the chat lines. We've had some really interesting questions. I think we've covered most of those areas. Thank you so much for your expertise and your insight and your enthusiasm. And I hope people have enjoyed it. Please say if you haven't. If you've got some suggestions for other talks, please send them in and we will try and work on them. This is an attempt to fill some of those gaps that are left as a consequence of COVID-19 restrictions. So what I would really like to say is keep safe, keep washing your hands, enjoy the outdoors, get out and use some copper. Thank you very much indeed. Good night and be safe.
Good night. Thank you. Or zinc or anything else. Good night. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.